Hi, it's John Iannuzzi, producer of Business Talk with Jim Campbell, and on this edition of Business Talk Radio, Jim welcomes back money manager Vitaliy Katsenelson. In this, the second part of our interview with Vitaliy, he offers his insights on investing in legendary investor Masayoshi Son, CEO of Softbank. Now, Son is a Japanese billionaire technology entrepreneur, investor, and philanthropist. Softbank is a Japanese holding company which runs Vision World, the world's largest technology-focused venture capital fund. They have over $100 billion in capital. Vitaliy, of course, recently joined us when we discussed the future of Tesla. Here's the continuation of that interview with Jim Campbell and Vitaliy Katsenelson.
Hey, Vitaliy Katsenelson's agreed to stay on for a few minutes here. I was fascinated. A while back, you did, and I get your newsletter. We're very focused on what you thought was a great, even calling it the next Warren Buffett. I pay attention because I'm a huge Buffett fan. Softbank with Masayoshi Son. And I instantly had trouble in my mind thinking, well, first off, he's into mainly new ventures, which is risky and away from Buffett, and also classic asset liability mismatch, right? He was making investments in negative cash flow businesses that were visionary and funding it with short-term debt in some cases or big interest rates. But this guy was the next Buffett. I'd like to kind of get your take on where you are now, why you saw him the way he is, and just what is SoftBank now?
Yeah, no, let me give you pushback a little bit on one of your points. SoftBank basically got started by him it has nothing to do with bank. It's actually started the software distribution business. And this is why it was a soft bank. So until 5 years ago, U.S. investors thought that this was a Japanese bank, but it really never was. That's point number one. Okay. So it was a software distribution business. And I think one of his best qualities that he saw the next wave of technological revolutions. So he saw the internet revolution, computer revolution first, and he invested in that. Then he saw internet revolution, and he invested in Yahoo's and Cisco's before the internet bubble. So he was always very good at seeing the next waves, and he would buy a basket of companies. Some of them would succeed, some of them would fail, but the ones that succeed would by far outweigh the losses.
And I think he made a huge amount of money on Alibaba, right?
Oh yeah, and we'll get there in a second. Yeah, so and then after that, he saw the internet developing in China, and he probably made one of the best investments ever made. Invested tens or maybe $100 million in Alibaba, which is worth $100 billion today, something like that. So, Did he make other, $10 or $100 million investments that went bust? Sure, but Alibaba offset, all of them. In addition to that, and this point is going to be important, he also took over two broadband companies in Japan that were bleeding money. One was a broadband company, one was a Vodafone KK, which was a wireless company. And he took those companies from the state where they were gushing money into very profitable enterprises. Okay, and the reason it's important, because these companies were producing a lot of cash flows. And these cash flows that he took and financed his investments in others. So it wasn't and I think the reason you would think about short-term debt, etc., because of the bank in its name. But no, it's actually he took imagine you own Verizon, and Verizon generates all these cash flows, and you just taking these cash flows and investing into the businesses that are growing very fast, etc. And so the reason I didn't just call him Warren Buffett. I called him his combination of Warren Buffett, Steve Jobs, and Richard Branson. So it was a bigger compliment than just Buffett. Okay. The reason I called him Buffett because I think he has absolutely incredible investment record. I mean, just realize this is a guy who built a company out of nothing that's worth billions of dollars, and he's one of the richest men in Japan, just like Buffett was one of the richest men in the United States, completely based on his investment results. That's point number one. The reason I called him a Steve Jobs because, and this is a true story. He told in Charlie Rose, he came to 2005. He came to Steve Jobs with the drawing of an iPod with some dials on it and said, "Steve, can you make this for us?" And Jobs said, "Masa, why didn't you go, running your phone company and let us deal with technology. And Masayoshi's son asked them, said, you know what, fine, but when you bring it to Japan, we want to have exclusivity. And so when Apple came out with iPhone, Softbank's telecom arm got exclusivity for iPhone, which allowed, which increased its market share, which was very successful for them. And point number 3, the reason I call him Richard Branson. Richard Branson would pick very difficult companies and turn them around and made them very successful. And that's what he has done multiple times. So that is kind of SoftBank's story pre-2018.
And right, and then there's some problems.
Yeah, yes. And I think this is where 2 things really made me question Masayoshi-san's temporary sanity. Was his investment in WeWork and how much money he was keep sinking into that.
Yeah.
Also, it was a bigger problem because he was buying companies. He was thinking if he puts a lot of money into something and successful, he's going to make money. But he was not buying embryos. He was buying companies that were very mature already, and he was paying a huge price for them, billions of dollars. And his WeWork was really, I was questioning WeWork. Something else that really kind of made me question him a little bit. And then he may actually prove me wrong on this. His willingness to use debt in his Vision One fund, which was basically his vehicle, that he used to make all these investments, where he was basically to some degree forcing the employees to invest into it and the company to invest into it. And I think this is a good lesson to some degree of somebody drinking too much of his own Kool-Aid. And I think psychologically he just basically he got impatient with the future, and I think this when he became impatient, he started to use too much debt.
That's what I meant. By the way, that's a good point about the Kool-Aid. But that's what I meant to me. He suddenly had debt payments on investments that were illiquid.
Yeah, no, I think that's what you meant. Okay, that's a different. And that's why we sold the stock. We actually owned it for 5 years, and we made good money on this. But we sold the stock just because of that reason.
Let me ask you another thing that maybe was a negative. See what your impact is. He had so much capital, right? And Buffett really is an allocator of capital in the most efficient way. Did he have too much capital and he started throwing money? And with that, this guy that ran WeWork, did he misjudge his character and his management ability?
I think so. I think this is where hubris comes in, right? He's this is the guy who found Jack Ma, right? And then had this Alibaba investment. And so now he's basically, this is probably the most difficult part of investing, is have this hubris in check, right? Because you look at I forget the guy's name, Newman, I forget the first name, the guy who ran WeWork. And you see, and maybe there were some similarities between Jack Ma. He saw maybe some similarities, but also there were things that were different. And this is the problem with always drawing analogies, because you never have a perfect analogy, you never have a perfect comparison. And then obviously he misjudged the guy who ran WeWork, your other question, did he make a mistake? Did Masayoshi's son make a mistake of having too much capital?
Yeah,
I think so. And I think it's just when he was going into in this market, there's a Heisenberg. I'm gonna butcher it, but the Heisenberg principle is that you by and that comes from quantum mechanics. By observing something, you change its behavior. If you're a physicist, please forgive me. I'm just an investor guy in Denver, but it's kind of the same thing. You walk into this $100 million into a market where usually funds in this market, funds usually are in $500 million, and all you're doing is just inflating prices of everything.
Yeah,
and your money just buys you less. And I think this is where you could argue that that's why he's not Buffett, like this is kind of
Yeah.
this is the why Buffett has the patience of waiting for the pat pitch, and Masayoshi-san did not have Buffett's patience. Maybe like I don't think it's a really that much hindsight, because I thought about this at the time as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was, well, spend $10 billion, $30 billion, but leave the rest of the money when at some point there will be an opportunity to buy things.
Yep.
And this is how Buffett made his money. He was kind of the lender or the buyer of last resort.
Yep.
This is when your $100 billion is going to have a buying power of $1 trillion.
Yeah.
And so
that's a good point.
This is Business Talk with Jim Campbell, and on this episode we are chatting with money manager Vitaliy Katsenelson, talking Softbank, value investing, and philanthropy. Stay tuned.
If you're trying to quit drinking or doing too many drugs, listen to me. You don't know me and we'll never meet. I had a problem like you once. I drank and used to party a little too much till it got out of control and almost ruined my life. I realized I needed help to fix my problem before it totally destroyed me. If you've tried to fix your drinking and drug problem and you know you can't do it alone, you need to call the National Treatment Advisors. They'll immerse you into a 30-day program to replace your old habits with new habits and totally change your life. And if you have PPO private health insurance, the entire program may be covered. Fix your problem right now before it gets any worse. Get clean. Call now and learn more. 800-296-0906. 800-296-0906. 800-296-0906.
This is Business Talk with Jim Campbell. I'm John Iannuzzi, producer of Business Talk. And on this episode, we're chatting with money manager Vitaliy Katsenelson, talking Softbank, value investing, and philanthropy.
And the hedge funds and the private equity funds, Buffett's a critic of them. They feel they got to spend money because it's sitting there. They're taking a management fee, right? And so it's ass backwards. They're looking to spend money as opposed to wait and be patient, as you were saying. Also, your job, you've got to do this valuation. You've got to be objective. You got to, it's got to be numbers driven to a certain extent. You have Jack Ma, Newman, and Musk you've just mentioned. How do you take into the risk factor of their flaws?
It's a good question. Jack Ma, interesting. So, like, there is an Alibaba, Jack Ma is kind of checked out of Alibaba now. So he's, so that is a risk factor to me, right? Because what I would like to do in general, I'd like to be on the right side of the management, and I want to be in this. I want to be sitting right next to them. So our incentives are aligned, and this was great about Masayoshi's son, because he owns 20% of the Softbank. But also at the same time, it shows you that even that is not foolproof, because Masayoshi's son is human, and he could get, he could drink too much of his Kool-Aid, and that's exactly what happened. So Elon Musk, at some point, a person with very high IQ may, and this is, I'm quoting Buffett or Charlie Munger, somebody, he may start taking, kind of picking on the problems that are higher than his IQ, and therefore his failures will be more dramatic. And so is their ability, I guess, human ability to handle success is very, very important. It's not there's a great book.
Interesting.
There was a great book about Jesse Livermore, Reminiscences of Stock Operator or Speculator, I forget. But there's a quote there that really stuck with me. He was one of the most successful traders ever lived in the 1920s. And he had this very successful run, and he was paralyzed because he made so much money that he was afraid that his gains are now influencing his judgment in a bad way. And so I think when you look at these people, you start questioning, well, just because he succeeded for so long, does it make his judgment, does it impair his judgment? And I think that's what happened to Masayoshi-san for a while. And I think he may be back to normal now. He ate some of the humble pie, and he's But that's something very important to be on lookout.
I must say, to your credit, to be able to do a reevaluation of somebody you thought was perfect is obviously a great skill, and that's going to lead into letting, as we finish up, people have had a chance to see how you look at things, your insights, what you've uncovered on Tesla. Tell us a little bit about your business and the type of investors that you like to see in your portfolio.
Jim, before this, actually, I have a podcast, and you see there's it's you can find it on, if you go to investor.fm. Okay. But when you get to the website's page, you're going to see 4 pictures on that site, and they will put there, intentionally. There's a picture of Albert Einstein. There's a picture of Warren Buffett. Okay. There's a picture of Leonard Bernstein, my favorite conductor.
Yeah, you're a big classical music guy.
That's right. And then there was a picture of Masayoshi-san. So like these people. So and you know what? The older I get, I realize even your role models have flaws.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, should I take off, and so this podcast is 2 years old. Should I take off Masayoshi-san's picture? And I realized no, because guess what? He is a human being. He has, there's so much I can learn from him, from a lot of his great decisions, but also from his flaws as well. And I think this is an important point. So I run IMA. We are a value investment firm in Denver, Colorado. And we basically, people come to us, high net worth people come to us and say, Vitaliy, here's my life savings. Please don't screw it up. And so we are basically, it's for us, it's a very important task, because we're trying to grow their wealth. But at the same time, I'm trying to do this in a way that if the version of the future comes now, because if you look forward, there are a lot of different futures that can play out. Some of them are great, some of them are not so great. And what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to position the portfolio that will benefit from the great ones, but if the not so great ones come around, we'll survive through that. And if you look at Buffett's success, his ability to survive is probably one of the most important qualities. That's what basically, allowed him to be where he is today. So I'm a value investor. So I go to Berkshire Hathaway annual meetings, when they're there. Yep. And I've been, I'm kind of indoctrinated in value investment philosophy. And so we run portfolios, value investment portfolios here. So that's what we do.
You're listening to Business Talk with Jim Campbell. Up next, more with money manager Vitaliy Katsenelson on Softbank and legendary investor Masayoshi-san.
Recover Now is a national campaign aimed at the education and awareness of the devastating effects of opioid and heroin abuse and curbing drug and alcohol addiction in the United States. Recover Now is sponsored by treatment facilities nationwide. Many of them have been where you are, and they want to help by spreading a message of hope and recovery. They're working hand in hand with major insurance companies nationwide that can help you or a loved one get clean in 7 to 30 days. Recover Now is embarking on a national outreach campaign on TV and radio to promote anti-addiction messages. So if you, a loved one, or someone you know has a problem with drugs or alcohol, do not wait. A new life for you could be 30 days away. Call us right now. I promise this call can change your life. Sponsored by the Detox and Treatment Helpline.
800-357-8110. 800-357-8110. That's 800-357-8110. If you or a loved one is a survivor of abuse by Boy Scouts of America representatives as far back as the 1970s, we urge you to speak up. We'll stand with you and get you the help and financial compensation you deserve. A jury in Portland, for example, awarded $18.5 million in punitive damages in one Boy Scout sexual abuse case. The Boy Scouts of America filed for bankruptcy, and funds have been set aside to compensate those injured. Time is limited, and so are the funds. Call today. Don't wait. For free information on how to file your claim, call All Survivors Advocates right now. We have a long track record in helping our clients get the legal justice and compensation they deserve. Please, we are ready to help you. Call today.
800-364-2984. 800-364-2984. 800-364-2984. That's 800-364-2984.
This is Business Talk with Jim Campbell. We're talking with money manager Vitaliy Katsenelson, discussing Softbank, value investing and philanthropy, and Katsenelson's future plans.
Are you writing another book right now?
I'm working on the book that's going to come out in April. And this book is probably the most...
Oh, you're going to be competing against me. Oh, my God.
No, trust me, you won't, because my book is going to actually... This is the first non-financial book I ever wrote. Oh. And we don't have a title yet, but I basically took all the articles I wrote about life, and I wrote some of the articles that I wrote and never published, and we kind of put them into a book. And so one of those things I basically wrote for my kids, because here's the thing: my kids don't read my emails, and a lot of my emails are actually about them. So I figured if I write, I'll put it together. And there's maybe some narcissistic legacy part in it, but yeah, but that's the book I'm working on. We don't have a title yet. My working title.
You actually write early in the morning, right? Almost all the time.
Yeah, so I'm a morning person in general. So I get up at about somewhere between 4 and 5 in the morning, and I write about 2 hours a day. The interesting part about the reason I'm able to write so much. Think about it. If I just write 2 hours a day every single day, I'm gonna write 720 hours a year. That is probably more than most people written in their 3 lifetimes, just in 1 year. The more you write, the better you get. And so this is why I'm able to write so much. And also another thing is, the writing, what it does to you, a couple of things. First of all, you start looking for things to write about. So everything, like my wife has like something happens at home. She's like, oh my God, this is going to be in your next article. And so, but this is how my mind works. I always I read something. I always look for analogies. Like you and I talked, about Tesla. You and I talked about Masayoshi son, and there's a lot of analogies, that used for that, because that's how my mind works. Also, one thing writing does to you, which I found to be incredibly beneficial. When you start reading as a writer. So you start looking for sentence structure, for the voice, etc. Another thing, and this has happened to me, when I started to write more about life, it has made me a better person. And let me explain what I mean. A lot of times I write about some great moments that happened to me. I'll give you an example. I would take my daughters to Barnes and Noble, and a couple times a month, and for us it would be a great experience. And I wrote about this, and so I wrote about this moment that happens every so often, it doesn't happen all the time. And once I wrote about this, I realized I want to be a person who does things like this more often, and spends more time with my daughters, and therefore it's almost like there's some reflexivity, because that made me a better person, because now I intentionally try to spend more time with my kids because of that. So anyway, so those are kind of the side effects of kind of writing. And if I look at, me as a human being, kind of formation me as a human being, the most important thing that ever happened to me from that perspective is writing. It just completely rewired me. It changed me.
I find that fascinating, and it's interesting because I had the Madoff thing fall in my lap because of connections I got to do interviews. So I had to turn that into a book I thought made sense. So I have basically had to learn how to write and how to do this. And it's exactly right. The fluency by the end, I talk about a certain magic. I would be writing and a word would come to me that might fit in a sentence. I wouldn't even know what the word meant. I'd go look it up and I'd say, holy cow, that's the exact word that I want. So it becomes almost, I don't know, metaphysical, like you're saying. It's a good discipline too, right, on getting your thinking straight.
Actually, you're the first person I heard to make this point, because it happens to me all the time. I use these words, I'm like, what does it mean? And then I do the same thing. I'm like, really?
Yeah. Where did it come from? Yeah,
I know. Well, I know. So, but because basically what happens, and this is what I realized. You basically have two computers. You have a conscious computer and subconscious computer. Conscious computer, think of it as actually, in fact, it's a lot more like your iPhone. It has a good computer. It has a lot of sensors, etc.
Yeah.
But comparing to your subconscious, it's nothing, because your subconscious is, think about it, it's like Amazon Web Services, where you have hundreds of servers connected together.
That's cool.
There's a huge data storage, right? That's what your subconscious is. And so when you write, you're kind of basically forcing your conscious to access your subconscious. And suddenly, I'm sure you read that word at some point. You didn't make up that word. You read it or heard it somewhere. It just was stored in the deep corridors of subconscious, and that subconscious retrieved it and sent it to a subconscious. And tell me if this has happened to you. Sometimes I write an article and I feel like I am an outsider, and then I read it, like, did I just write this? In a sense, like it came out of my subconscious, the whole thing, and I'm like, this is interesting. Like, I wish I wrote it. Like, I have this thinking, like, I wish I actually wrote it.
What I found, which I was amazed myself too, is that, I come from an objective thinking, like your world, and I figured this is going to be fact-based, laid out, like a research analyst. And then, McGraw-Hill said, well, it really ought to be a story, right? And the next thing I said, I'm not capable of doing that. Well, by the time it was end, people are saying that have read it, it's a detective story, it's readable, it's cool. And I don't know where all that came from, because I didn't think I even had the capability to do that. And I guess that's part of the magic of learning, how to.
No, you're right. I think you're right about the McGraw-Hill. I guess now, it's right about stories, because there's a book, Sapiens, and I forget the Harari. I forget his Yuval Harari, and which is a phenomenal book.
Yep.
And he basically talks about how humans need stories. That's how you're able to get. If you think about Republic,
it's how they process, right? It's how you process.
This is how you have a Republican Party, you have Democrat Party. It's just a Republican. It's one story. You have another story. This is how you have religions. It's just a story. Like, religions don't exist in nature. It's this. Well, I don't want to get it. In general, I'm not going to pick on specific religion. A Democratic Party does not, or Republican Party, or Libertarian Party does not exist in nature. It's a story that we could have created, and that's what kind of. And so as humans, we're always looking for stories. And I think that's right. When you write a book about Madoff, it's not about how much money was stolen, how much money was recovered. It's really about the human. It's about it's about people who suffered from this, who benefited from this. So that's what you're writing about. So
another example in there is I wanted to write about how the system failed as well. The SEC, for instance. So instead of laying out what I would have thought was just lay out where the SEC screwed up, I took the whistleblowers look, the Harry Markopolos, and the stories in the screw-ups of the 5 or 6 investigations, and weaved them together. And by the time you're done, it's not just reading a dry manual of what the SEC missed. It actually sounds like an interesting story. Now, I'm biased right now because I wrote it, but we'll see if anybody in the market likes it. But
Jim, what's going to be the name of your book?
It's Madoff Talks: Uncovering the Truth Behind the Most Notorious Ponzi Scheme in History, and it's going to have the first assessment also of whether the family knew, the sons and Ruth, and also I wanted to weave in. No one has looked at the architecture from the whole system failed. SIPC, the SEC, FINRA, all these groups. The Madoff recovery trustee brutalized a lot of the Madoff victims. You're going to be surprised. You'll find that Madoff himself was extorted by his biggest 4 investors. In fact, the biggest investor made $7 billion 7 or 8 times what Madoff stole. And a lot of this stuff isn't known, and I've tried to weave the whole thing together in a way that isn't too confusing to people. So we'll see it. And
I'm looking forward to reading this. This sounds fascinating. The part about Madoff and what always fascinated me is that because he was a director of one of the stock exchanges, right? Something, not stock exchanges. He was
actually one of the founders almost of NASDAQ, the electronic brain that merged all the regional brokerage houses. He was the driver of that. He was a market maker, which, by the way, was a completely legitimate business that he built.
Yeah, but I think the interesting part about this is, therefore, your brain could not process how a person like that who did that.
Yes, exactly right.
And this is like, you and I talked about Masayoshi's son, right? Like, and this is like, I think if you think about a conversation today, it's how like you have to be a nuanced thinker in general, how you can have great people do horrible bad things. Yeah. And it's just because people are fallible. I think that's kind of so Madoff, on one side, he was able to do NASDAQ, on the other side, and because he did NASDAQ, people could not imagine he can do something completely opposite.
Very well said. Exactly right.
You're listening to Business Talk with Jim Campbell. Up next, more with money manager Vitaliy Katsenelson on Softbank, legendary investor Masayoshi Son. Coming up, our final segment.
Would you like to host your own radio program or podcast? Park City Productions 06604 is a Bridgeport, Connecticut-based radio broadcast solutions company. Follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's Park City Productions 06604. Call us at 203-522-8801.
This is Business Talk with Jim Campbell. I'm John Iannuzzi, producer of Business Talk. And on this episode, we're chatting with money manager Vitaliy Katsenelson, talking Softbank, value investing, and philanthropy.
And I think, so when I think about Masayoshi Son, for me, what was difficult about Masayoshi Son, because I was always the one defending him. But even at some point, like the critics were right, like got to the point where critics were right. And so, because if he continued to do what he was doing, he could have destroyed the company, And so it's as an investor, you have to, I guess you have to assume that people are fallible, that they will make mistakes, and I guess you just want to, if you own a company, you want to make sure that if they make a mistake, that it's not going to bankrupt the company. And it happens all the time. So we own a company that made a large investment. And I was questioning the decision that they made. But I knew that even if that investment becomes a zero, we'll be okay. It's going to cost us a year of earnings. But if you can, but it's an investment, you have that luxury that it's not not everything is binary. So people can make mistakes and you're going to be okay. But anyway, so I'm really looking forward to reading your book. This is fascinating.
Thank you. And what you're saying, by the way, is one of Buffett's strengths, and obviously one of yours, is Buffett can admit that he made mistakes and re-examine. I believe, for instance, that if President Trump had been able to say, you know what, I mismanaged that pandemic, I was wrong, and this is what we're going to do now, right? Mm-hmm. Anything along those lines, and he would have been reelected because the economy was going well when he started the year. He's incapable of admitting any mistakes, which means he doesn't listen and he doesn't learn. And I think that's what will do him in if he loses.
So I think to admit to mistake requires two things. It requires self-awareness, in a sense, saying I made a mistake, and then requires you courage to basically, because it's courage to say I made a mistake.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna kind of try to walk, kind of not to touch on politics, but in general, if I was talking to my kids, I think that's an important quality, to have a self-awareness, to basically, if you're a person who basically thinks that you're never gonna, that you don't make mistakes, then you're never gonna look at then you're not gonna have self-awareness.
And you're not gonna grow. You can't grow.
So the reason, actually kind of interesting, the reason I want to call my book Student of Life, that what I'm writing, and I'm not sure if it's going to be called a Student of Life, but the reason I'm really, to me, that's word has so much meaning, because for you not to become arrogant, you need to have a mentality of a person who is always learning, because a person cannot learn I'm quoting one of the Stoics or somebody, you cannot learn what you already know. Okay, so a student of life, I consider myself, I don't like monikers, like I don't like labels where, who is Vitaliy? Vitaliy is a value investor. Well, Vitaliy is a lot more than that, or Jim for that matter, right?
Right.
I'm a father, I'm a writer, I am the guy who walks, I'm a son, etc. Student of life, though, the reason I like it, it's so vague and ambiguous, but at the same time, it's inspirational a little bit, because it means that I can be anybody I want it to be, as long as I keep learning. And I think this is why kind of this student, that's why I kind of, my publisher and I are still kind of debating what to call it, but I think we're probably going to settle, on a Student of Life or something, or some variation of that. The only problem is, the reason we are struggling with that is that there's another book that's been published, 7-8 years ago, that has that name, and that's I don't know, what's going to happen there. So we'll see.
I think Buffett uses his term about himself, which I think I'm a big believer in, which is he's a learning machine.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. I think you need to be open-minded, I guess. And continue to learn. And just think about it, like Buffett bought Apple. This is the person. Well, Buffett, the person who said, "I will never buy a technology company." Then he buys Apple. And he made more money on Apple just because of the size of the investment.
He's made $40 billion on Apple,
which is absolutely incredible. Yeah,
which is unbelievable. And you know what? And this is another where I give him credit. He bought IBM, and I know a lot about IBM, and my wife works there. And I didn't think it made any sense, that he didn't understand it. But I figured his ego is going to be tied up. He's not going to be able to get out of it. And look, he got out of it.
That's why Buffett is Buffett. I mean, and like he bought airlines. He bought airlines. He lost money. He said, "We'll never buy airlines again."
And then he bought them again.
And the structure of the industry changes, and there was a structure did change.
Yeah.
Pandemic happens, and he realizes that this is a scenario that he was not prepared before. He sells the airlines. He loses money on this. Moves forward, and I think this is, as an investor, this is very inspirational. So, yeah. Now,
let me before we go, give folks a chance where they can get Tesla, Elon Musk, and the EV revolution.
Yeah, so they can. Okay, so they go to TeslaAnalysis.com. They can listen to my podcast on Investor.fm, like FM radio, and if they want to read my articles, they can go to ContrarianEdge, EDGE.com.
Can folks get in on your weekly emails, or how's that?
Yeah, so if they go to Contrarian Edge, ContrarianEdge.com, they can get it.
So we'll be able to do that. This has been Business Talk with Jim Campbell. Go to JimCampbellRadio.com. Go to Madoff Talks, Uncovering the Truth Behind the Most Notorious Ponzi Scheme in History. At Amazon now for pre-order, out April 27th. Thanks again for hanging on. We've got 2 shows out of a brilliant money manager. And Vitaliy, thanks again for your time. It was a lot of fun. It was like a mind meld there. All right, thanks Vitaliy for your time. We'll have you back again, of course. Thank you, John.
Thank you, guys. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Still don't know what I was waiting for, and my time was running wild, a million dead-end streets, and every time I thought I got it made, it seemed the taste was not so sweet. So I turned myself to face me, but I've never caught a glimpse how the others must see the faker. I'm much too fast to take that test. Change it.
Turn and face the strain.
Change it.